Can somebody explain to me what is happening? How can MCU movies and TV shows vary in quality so much? How is that possible? Technically, it's done by kind of the same people. Like back in the good old days, there were better and worse MCU movies, but overall, they were on a pretty similar level of quality mostly. Now you have shows and movies that are bad or plain boring, and then you out of nowhere get a Guardians 3, a Shang-Chi, a Moon Knight, or subject of today's video, Loki. Like, how did we make such a drastic jump from their previous endeavor, Secret Invasion, that was absolutely horrible, their next endeavor, that is The Marvels, that is possibly one of the worst movies in MCU history. Still, I hate it less than, like, No Way Home, but still. To now talking about possibly one of the best MCU things in history. Especially when it comes to their TV department that has no idea what they are doing. Sure, once in a blue moon you get a Moon Knight or a Loki, or for the most part a Falcon and Winter Soldier, but rest of their creation are so bad. But let's stop complaining about the state of MCU because I feel like I'm doing it every time I talk about MCU in any way. Let's praise what's in front of us, because in front of us there is a pretty great show. What is season 2 of Loki about? Well, dealing with consequences of season 1 and its ending. Seems simple? Sure. Because the idea for this season, very simple, but also very effective. They didn't try to overcomplicate it from the get-go. The what gives you everything you need to know, but what pushes the story forward and makes this show really feel interesting is the hows and the what thens. This season gives the characters a very clear goal, with a not very clear idea how to resolve it. This season is kind of a guessing game, trying to find a possible solution to a possibly impossible problem, the solution probably not working, and needing to find another solution, or a follow-up to this solution so we can make this work. It always tries to keep the characters and the viewers guessing with a few plot twists and a few mysteries, and most of the time I hate shows that are overloaded with plot twists, because most of the time they just don't make sense. They are just put in the show for no reason from the story perspective. But in this show they are all written exceptionally great. A, and it's a big one, they all make perfect sense. B, they are all very well built up. Nothing comes completely out of nowhere. It's all set up at some point, but you just don't realize that it will matter so much until it does. And most importantly, C, they all build off each other. Every obstacle and every brick in the wall builds off a previous one, to a point when you come to the ending and you feel like this is a culmination of everything that happened throughout this season. Every single thing that happened led to the ending. It's just a very satisfying story to follow, and it's very fun to see what happens next because it's all very creatively put together. Also, this season is much more focused on time travel than season 1, and it somehow works really well. Time travel is a motif that I'm not the biggest fan of. Most of the time it feels like it's just there because people think it's cool, but it doesn't add anything to the story and makes everything very convoluted, and most of the time doesn't really make any sense. But in this show it works because it's not the main part of it, it's another way to solve a main problem, but not to take all the focus away from anything. Like, the time travel happens, but they don't focus on the time travel itself, but they focus on why it happens and what happens, well, we finagle with time. It feels like the show had all the right ideas, and for the first time in what feels like forever, nobody just came in and decided to ruin everything for some reason, which is such a omnipresent problem with MCU these days. And it feels weird, but it's also great. Why don't they give some leeway to the creators more often? I have no idea, to be honest. But this show wouldn't be as good as it is without its main star, Loki. And yes, Loki is still the superstar of the show. The amount of scenes Loki is not in is probably in the single digits throughout season 2, and he has zero problems carrying it. They focused most of the storylines and the writing power and the emotion on Loki, and he pulled all of it off with flying colors. The charisma that we all know him from, the charm, the great comedy, the excellent acting, but also all of the emotional scenes and the character progression. Loki really has it all. And on that last one, I want to focus a little bit more. The progression of Loki's character throughout this series. His growth is simply amazing, but at heart, he's still Loki. Like, they never made him a completely different character. The creators managed to progress this character so much, but keep Loki being Loki throughout all of it. It's really amazing to watch, and my favorite part of this entire series. Okay, now let's move on from Loki and talk about Loki, or Sylvie as we all know her. Sylvie in season 2 serves mostly as the anchor to reality in this show. She's the most grounded and down-to-earth character of this season. She's basically the closest thing to the viewer, trying to understand all the craziness and the insane concept, and gives her a very interesting perspective on everybody's action and on all of what's happening. She's the one that's most connected to everything outside of TVA, and that makes her a very interesting character in this environment. She is the conscience of all the TVA characters, Loki included. She is the representation of the normal people who live on the timelines. And while everybody thinks mostly about the TVA, she thinks about the people. She was excellent in season 2. Her writing was amazing. Acting was great, the character work was exceptional. She was probably the second most important character of season 2. Not because of the screen time, because in comparison, she doesn't really get that much. She isn't on screen all the time. And not really because of what she does, because she doesn't really do anything that big, but she has the biggest presence out of any character in this show. Loki included. Awesome, awesome, awesome character. Let's move to the characters of kind of lesser importance to the story. Starting from Mobius. Mobius is still a great addition to the show, but like every character in season 2, because of Loki's growing importance and screen time in season 2, he doesn't really get much. He has a pretty interesting individual storyline, but it doesn't really get enough screen time for it to pack as much of a punch as it should, but it's still really good. Loki-Mobius interactions are still a huge highlight of the show. Tom Hiddleston and Owen Wilson still have a crazy chemistry. It just feels that Mobius could have got a little bit more. The two characters that needed a lot more, in my opinion, are B-15 and Renslayer. Starting from B-15, except a small little storyline she has that gets little to none screen time, she's just kind of there. Doesn't really do much, doesn't really say much, but she's almost always around Loki and Mobius, and I don't really understand why didn't they do anything with her. Like, she already is in a lot of scenes. Couldn't she do something or say something more important? If we cut her completely out of the show, nothing would really change, and it's a huge shame because her character showed a lot of potential, and the idea for her storyline in season 2 sounded pretty great, but nothing really materialized from it. A different case of a kind of same problem is Renslayer, because she actually gets a lot to do in season 2. She's basically the main villain, and she's great. Her storyline is great. She has an amazing presence. You have a sense that she's a real danger. But see, here is the problem. The last 2 episodes do everything to make everything she's done to that point not matter at all and feel like a waste of time. Like, for real, they make her completely not matter to the story, and the thing she's done has no impact and she immediately becomes an afterthought. I'm not kidding. In the end, she could have as well not been there for the entire season and nothing would have changed. I have no idea why they did that, but it was a huge shame because she was amazing up to that point. But then they force a feeling that she doesn't actually matter. It's a very weird case, and it's really hard to understand the thinking process behind it all. Let's shortly mention the new character of Obi. Obi is a small addition to the story, just a tech person. They need tech or someone who knows stuff about everything technical in TVA. That's Obi. He doesn't get any storylines, any progression, anything of that regard, but he's so goddamn funny and charming. I couldn't do anything but smile whenever I saw him on screen. A pointless character? Absolutely. But I loved him to death. A excellent addition in season 2. He's just fun. Moving on from the characters, let's talk about the actually somehow amazing visual palette of this show. MCU things are mostly known these days for looking like ass, their TV stuff especially, but this show actually looks like $1,000,000. Jesus. They mesh up a lot of completely different aesthetics visually, and not only are they great on their own, they also somehow mesh together very well. You have things like the TVA looking like a weird mashup of the video game Control and the weird sitcom from the 80s. You have Earth where every location looks so distinct and different and interesting. Different moments in the timeline looking like a complete time capsule. Time travel itself that looks like it's straight from a body horror, and so much more. And this show really gives you a feeling that you kind of get everything at the same time in the best way possible. It makes you feel like you are exploring a vast part of the universe. It all looks great, it all looks crisp, and it all looks really creatively put together. People who took care of the visuals in this season should become the most important people in the MCU moving forward, for real. They did an amazing job. Let's move on to my two biggest problems with the show. The first one being Kang, or the actor playing him. I felt really uncomfortable whenever Jonathan Majors appeared on screen. I get why they didn't remove him, because when all this stuff about him first came out, the show was either finished or almost finished, and they would basically have to redo all of it. But still, I felt weird while watching him. Fortunately, there isn't that much of him, but still, it was something that I couldn't move past, and it impacted my enjoyment of quite a few scenes of the show. My second biggest problem, this one focused just on the show, is the intrigue set up in episode 1. The structure of this season is really weird. The first 4 episodes follow a linear story, where in the first episode, they set up a few intrigues and a few questions for the future. Episode 5 is a complete sidestep, and episode 6 uses moments and scenes from previous episodes, but it's very close within itself. So because of that, they had to resolve all of the setup intrigues and answer all of these lingering questions before the beginning of episode 5. And because of that, it feels like they intentionally under-delivered on all of those intrigues and questions from episode 1 in the episode 4 just to move forward with the story, and it was really weird and most importantly really underwhelming. I don't really know why they gave up on those so hard. It just feels like they finished episode 3. They were starting episode 4 and they got the idea that episodes 5 and 6 will not really be that connected. So they just hammered through everything in episode 4 and it feels really messy. It is what it is. But overall, this is still one of the best MCU produced things in a while. An excellent story, characters, and the never-ending amounts of creativity make this show so much fun to watch and a very easy thing to enjoy. It's not very complicated. It's very easy to just boot up, watch, have fun, turn off, move on with your day. No problem. But it also has enough great details to keep those more engaged viewers, especially the big MCU nerds like this one right here, really engaged and really fall in love with the show. I would probably give it a strong 8, but hey, if you disagree with me. Maybe you don't like this show. If you want to praise this show too, maybe you just want to discuss it or share your opinion. I would be more than happy to discuss this show in the comments.